The phone rang at midnight, and before I even looked at the screen, I knew something was wrong. There's a certain sound a phone makes in the middle of the night that doesn't belong to good news. It's sharper, louder, like it's cutting through the dark instead of resting inside it. I was sitting on the edge of a hotel bed, tie already loosened, shoes kicked off, replaying the day's meetings in my head like I always did. Numbers, timelines, promises I wasn't sure I could keep. I almost let it ring. That's the part that still makes my chest tighten when I think about it. For half a second, maybe less, I considered silencing it. Just long enough to breathe. Just long enough to pretend I was still in control. I answered. Is this Mark? The voice was hesitant. Older. Not someone I knew well, but familiar enough to place. Yes, I said, already standing, already pacing. Who's this? It's Linda. Your neighbor. I didn't know who else to call. The room felt suddenly smaller, like the walls had taken a step toward me. What's wrong? There was a pause. A breath. The kind people take when they're about to say something that can't be unsaid. Your daughter is sitting in your driveway. She's alone. She has blood on her clothes. Everything after that sentence came apart. Time didn't stop. It fractured. The way glass does when it doesn't shatter all at once, just splits into lines you don't notice until it's too late. I remember gripping the phone too tightly. I remember the hum of the air conditioner. I remember thinking, absurdly, that I should sit down. How long has she been there? I asked. I don't know exactly, Linda said. I saw her when I took my trash out. She was just sitting. I thought maybe you'd stepped inside for a moment. But then I looked again. And she didn't move. My throat went dry. Is she hurt? I don't think so. She says she fell. But she's shaking. Mark, it's midnight. Midnight? I was 500 miles away. In a city I didn't care about. In a hotel room that smelled like detergent and recycled air. I pictured my driveway, the cracked concrete, the porch light that flickered if you didn't hit the switch just right. I pictured my daughter sitting there, knees pulled to her chest, waiting for a door that wasn't opening. I'm calling my wife, I said. It came out automatic, like a script I'd rehearsed my whole life. Okay, Linda said. I'll stay with her. But she's been alone for a while. I hung up and dialed my wife. Prang. Twice. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Nothing. I told myself it was fine. She might be asleep. Her phone might be dead. There were 1,000 reasons that didn't involve something being terribly wrong, and I clung to every single one of them like they were life rafts. I called my mother-in-law. She answered on the third ring. What? She snapped, like I'd interrupted something important. It's Mark, I said. Where's my daughter? The pause. Annoyed. She was here earlier. Earlier when? She left, she said. Or maybe she went outside. I don't know. My heart started pounding harder. She's alone in my driveway, I said slowly. It's midnight. She has blood on her clothes. Another pause. Longer this time. Well, she said, she's not our responsibility every minute of the day. Something cold slid down my spine. What does that mean? It means, she replied, irritation creeping into her voice, that you're always gone, Mark. You can't expect everyone else to rearrange their lives because you choose to travel all the time. I pulled the phone away from my ear and stared at it like it had betrayed me. How long was she there? I asked. I dropped her off hours ago, she said. She said you'd be back soon. Hours. 5 hours, as I would later learn. 5 hours of darkness. 5 hours of waiting. 5 hours where a little girl sat outside her own house, bleeding, because the adults in her life had decided it wasn't convenient to care. I ended the call without saying goodbye. My hands were shaking now. Not with panic, with something sharper. Anger maybe. Or fear that had nowhere to go. I called my brother. He answered immediately. What's wrong? He asked. My daughter's alone, I said. In the driveway. Can you get her? There was no hesitation. I'm on my way, he said. When the line went dead, the silence rushed back in. Louder than before. I stood there in that hotel room, surrounded by things I didn't need, wearing a suit I'd put on to convince the world I had my life together. I thought about the presentation I'd nailed that afternoon, the handshake from my boss, the promise of a promotion that would mean more travel, more nights like this, more absences I justified by saying I was providing. I told myself I did it for my family. That's what I always said. But standing there, imagining my daughter's small voice asking the dark when someone would come, the lie finally cracked. Providing wasn't the same as protecting. I booked the first flight home. Didn't care about the cost. Didn't care about the meeting I'd miss. I packed without folding anything, my hands moving faster than my thoughts. Every few seconds, I checked my phone, half expecting another call, half dreading it. Linda texted me a photo. I almost didn't open it. My daughter sat on the edge of the driveway, wrapped in a blanket too big for her. There was a dark smear on her sleeve. Her hair was tangled. Her eyes, God, her eyes, looked tired in a way no child's ever should. I sank onto the bed. This was my fault. Not because I wasn't there that night, but because I'd taught everyone, slowly, over years, that it was acceptable for me not to be. I stared at the ceiling until my phone buzzed again. My brother. I have her, he said. His voice was calm, but underneath it, I heard something else. Something tight. She's okay. Shaken. But okay. Thank you, I whispered. We'll talk when you get home, he added. There are things you need to know. The line went dead. I lay there in the dark, fully dressed now, waiting for morning. Waiting for a flight. Waiting for consequences I couldn't outrun this time. The man I was before that phone rang believed success meant sacrifice. By the time dawn broke, I understood the truth. Some sacrifices don't make you a hero. They make you absent. And absence, I was about to learn, leaves marks you can't see, but never really fade. The worst part wasn't the blood. It was the waiting. That's what kept looping in my head as the plane cut through the dark, as if speed alone could undo time. 5 hours. Not minutes. Not a momentary lapse. 5 full hours where my daughter sat outside her own house, believing, because she had been taught to, that adults would come if she stayed quiet enough. I stared out the airplane window, watching the blackness stretch endlessly beneath us, and tried to calculate how many times I'd told myself I'd make it up to her later. Later this weekend. Later this month. Later when things slowed down. Later never came. My phone buzzed again. A text from my brother. She's asleep now. Wouldn't let go of my arm at first. Kept asking if you were mad. The word hit harder than I expected. As if that was the danger she feared most. Not the dark, not the blood on her clothes, not the strangers passing by, but disappointing me. I typed back with shaking thumbs. Please tell her I'm not mad. Tell her I'm coming. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. I already did. She asked how long 5 hours was. I closed my eyes. When I opened them again, the memories started coming. Not all at once. Slowly. Methodically. Like a prosecutor laying out evidence I could no longer object to. The birthday I missed because of a last-minute meeting. The school play I watched through a grainy recording sent by my wife. The way my daughter stopped asking if I'd be home on time and started saying, "I know you're busy." I'd mistaken her understanding for resilience. It was obedience. By the time we landed, my anger had nowhere left to hide. It was no longer sharp or explosive. It had turned heavy. The kind that presses down on your chest and makes every breath feel earned. I drove straight from the airport to my brother's house. Dawn was just starting to bleed into the sky, that pale gray blue that feels neither like night nor morning. The streets were empty, quiet in a way that felt undeserved. He opened the door before I knocked. "She's in the guest room," he said quietly. "Sleeping." I nodded, unable to trust my voice. We stood there for a moment, 2 grown men in a hallway that suddenly felt too small. "How long?" I asked. He didn't pretend not to understand. "Linda said she saw her around 7, he replied. "It's almost midnight when she called you." 5 hours. I ran a hand over my face. "Did she say anything?" He hesitated. "That's not a good hesitation," I said. My brother leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "She said Grandma told her to wait outside. Said you'd be back soon." A word so small it should have been harmless. And when you weren't, he continued. She thought maybe it was her fault. That she did something wrong. The air left my lungs. I didn't go into the guest room right away. I couldn't. I stood there, staring at the closed door, terrified that if I saw her like that, small, asleep, trusting, I might break in a way I wouldn't be able to fix. Instead, I asked the question that had been circling me all night. Did you talk to Mom? Yes, he said. Flat. Controlled. I did. I looked at him sharply. And she said what she always says, he replied. That she raised her kids just fine. That children today are coddled. That this wouldn't have happened if you weren't gone all the time. There it was again. The blame slid neatly into place. Familiar. Convenient. I told her, my brother continued, that leaving a bleeding child alone in the dark isn't discipline. It's neglect. My throat tightened. What did she say to that? She told me not to be dramatic. Silence settled between us. For years, I'd let my mother-in-law define the rules because it was easier than confronting her. Because she was family. Because conflict required presence, and presence required time. Time I kept giving to everything else. I should have seen this, I said quietly. My brother didn't let me off the hook, but he didn't crush me either. You should have, he agreed. But seeing it now matters too. I finally opened the guest room door. My daughter lay curled on her side, clutching the edge of the blanket like it might disappear if she let go. There was a small bandage on her knee. Her eyelashes were wet, even in sleep. I knelt beside the bed. I'm here, I whispered, even though she couldn't hear me. She stirred anyway. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first. Then they found me. Her face crumpled. Daddy. I gathered her into my arms before she could say anything else. She smelled like soap and something metallic underneath it. She pressed her face into my shoulder and sobbed the way children do when they've held it in for too long. I waited, she said between breaths. I waited like Grandma said. I know, I murmured. I know. Did I do good? That was it. That was the moment something inside me split open. You did more than good, I said, my voice breaking despite my best effort. You did nothing wrong. None of this is on you. Ever. She nodded, like she wanted to believe me but wasn't sure yet. Later, after she fell asleep again, this time with my hands still wrapped around hers, I sat at my brother's kitchen table, staring at a cup of coffee I hadn't touched. This can't happen again, I said. He nodded. Then it won't. But that means things change. I thought about my job. My marriage. The fragile peace I'd maintained by staying absent. I know, I said. My phone buzzed. A text from my wife. Just saw the missed calls. What's going on? I stared at the screen for a long time. 5 hours of silence. That's what it had taken for everything I believed about my life to fall apart. Back. Our daughter was alone. For 5 hours. We need to talk. I set the phone down, knowing that whatever came next wouldn't be easy, but also knowing something else now. Silence is a choice. And I was done making it. I left my brother's house just after sunrise, the sky washed out and colorless, like it hadn't decided what kind of day it wanted to be. My daughter was still asleep when I kissed her forehead goodbye. I told myself it was better that way. Easier. But the truth was, I didn't trust my voice not to shake if she woke up and asked where I was going. Home, I would have said. And for the first time in years, I wouldn't have been sure what that meant. The drive stretched out in front of me, miles of highway that felt longer than they should have been. Every red light was an accusation. Every green one a reminder that time didn't slow down just because I wanted it to. I turned the radio on, then off. Every song felt wrong. Too loud. Too happy. Too careless. I drove in silence, my thoughts filling the car like a second passenger I couldn't kick out. I kept seeing her in my head, small, wrapped in a blanket, waiting. Not crying. Not screaming. Just sitting there, doing what she was told. That part haunted me most. She hadn't panicked because she trusted the system we built around her. Trusted that adults showed up. Trusted that rules led to safety. Trusted me. And trust, I was realizing, is a fragile thing. It doesn't shatter loudly. It erodes. Slowly. Quietly. Until one day you notice there's nothing solid left to stand on. I thought about the man I'd been trying so hard to become. Reliable. Successful. Needed. At work, those traits earned respect. Promotions. Praise. At home, they translated into absence. I remembered a conversation with my boss from a few months earlier. I just landed a major client, the kind that made leadership lean forward when you spoke. "You're hungry," he'd said, clapping me on the back. "That's what makes you valuable." I'd smiled. I'd felt proud. I'd never asked what hunger was costing me. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. A text from my brother. "She woke up asking for you. I told her you were driving home." She said okay. Didn't cry. Didn't cry. I didn't know whether to feel relieved or ashamed. "Thank you for everything. I owe you." The reply came almost instantly. "You don't owe me. You're." The words stayed with me long after the screen went dark. As the city came into view, my chest tightened. Familiar streets. Familiar turns. The route I'd driven 1,000 times, usually distracted, on calls, planning my next move, thinking 3 steps ahead. Today, every detail stood out. The cracked sidewalk near the corner. The flickering streetlight that never got fixed. The driveway. I slowed without meaning to. In daylight, it looked harmless. Ordinary. A place no one would ever imagine as the site of something traumatic. That's how these things hide. I parked and sat there for a moment, engine running, hands on the wheel. The house stared back at me, quiet and closed, like it was holding its breath. I thought about all the times I'd pulled into that driveway late at night, annoyed that everyone was already asleep. Annoyed that life didn't pause to celebrate my effort. Now I understood how selfish that was. I shut off the engine and went inside. The house smelled the same. Neutral. Too safe. That illusion cracked when I noticed the faint smear on the concrete near the steps. A darker spot I hadn't seen before. Maybe I would have missed it on any other day. I knelt down and touched it. Blood. Not much. Just enough. My stomach turned. I scrubbed my hands at the sink until the water ran hot, then hotter, as if heat alone could erase what had already happened. I changed my clothes, but the feeling stuck to me, clinging beneath my skin. I walked through the house, room by room, seeing it through new eyes. The living room where I'd promised, after this project. The kitchen table where I'd answered emails during dinner. The hallway where my daughter used to wait for me, sitting on the floor with her toys, just in case I came home early. I stopped at her bedroom door. The bed was made. The stuffed animals lined up carefully, like she'd been taught to keep things neat so they wouldn't be a problem. I sat on the edge of the bed and let my head fall into my hands. This wasn't about one night. It was about a pattern. My phone buzzed again. My wife. "I'm on my way home. We need to talk." I stared at the message, my heart beating faster, not with anger this time, but with something closer to fear. I realized then that I'd spent years preparing for professional failure. Backup plans. Emergency funds. Exit strategies. I'd done nothing to prepare for personal collapse. When she walked through the door an hour later, we didn't hug. Didn't ask how the other was doing. We stood there, facing each other like strangers who shared too much history to pretend this was a casual conversation. "She's safe," she said first. "Your brother texted me." "Yes," I replied. "She is. Now." She winced. "That's not fair," she said. "No," I agreed. "It isn't." We sat at the kitchen table. The same one where we'd once talked late into the night about dreams and plans and how we'd be different. "I didn't think she was alone," my wife said quietly. "Your mom said she had it handled." "I didn't either," I said. "That's the problem." She looked up at me then, eyes tired. Defensive. "You're not here, Mark," she said. "Not really. So when things happen, people fill the gaps." The words stung because they were true. "I thought providing was enough," I said. "I thought if I did my part, everything else would work itself out." She shook her head slowly. "That's not how families work," she replied. Silence settled between us, not the careless silence of missed calls, but a heavier one. The kind that demands honesty or breaks something permanently. "I don't know how we fix this," she said. Neither did I. But for the first time, I wasn't looking for an escape route. I was looking for a way to stay. That night, after she went to bed, I sat alone in the dark living room, listening to the house breathe. Every sound felt amplified. Every shadow heavier. I thought about my brother's words. You're not money. Not success. Presence. I didn't know yet what that would cost me. But as I stared at the front door, the same door my daughter had waited behind for 5 hours, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. The man who kept choosing work over everything else couldn't be the man who walked back into that driveway again. And tomorrow, I would have to decide who I was willing to stop being. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in our bed listening to the house settle, every creak sounding like an accusation. My wife slept on her side, facing away from me, the space between us filled with things we hadn't said and weren't ready to. I stared at the ceiling and counted breaths like they were miles I still had to drive. Sometime before dawn, my phone buzzed. My brother. She's awake. Asking for you again. I was out of bed before my mind caught up with my body. I didn't shower. Didn't eat. I pulled on yesterday's clothes and drove back across town with the sun just beginning to edge over the buildings, lighting everything too clearly. He opened the door and stepped aside without a word. She was sitting at the kitchen table, feet swinging, a mug of warm milk cupped in both hands. A Band-Aid peeked out from beneath her pajama pants, already starting to curl at the edges. When she saw me, she froze. Not ran. Not cried. She waited. That pause, small, cautious, hurt more than any accusation could have. Daddy, she asked. I'm here, I said, crossing the room in 3 steps. I dropped to my knees in front of her chair so we were eye to eye. I'm right here. She studied my face like she was checking for something, anger, maybe, or disappointment. You came back, she said. Yes, I replied. And I'm not leaving. Her shoulders loosened just a little. I noticed her hands then. Still faintly stained, no matter how many times my brother must have washed them. The blood had settled into the lines of her palms, dark and stubborn. My chest tightened. Can I see your knee? I asked gently. She nodded and lifted her leg onto my thigh. I peeled the bandage back carefully. The scrape wasn't deep, but it was angry-looking, red around the edges. The kind of injury that stings more because you're scared than because it hurts. It happened when I fell, she said quickly. I didn't mean to. I know, I said. You don't have to explain. She looked down at her hands. There was a lot of blood, she whispered. I tried not to cry. Something inside me broke open. Why? I asked. She shrugged. Grandma said crying makes things worse. I swallowed hard. And when you were sitting outside, I continued, keeping my voice steady with effort, what were you thinking? She hesitated. That if I stayed quiet, someone would come, she said. I didn't want to be trouble. Trouble. A word no child should ever use to describe themselves. I took her hands in mine, careful, deliberate. You are never trouble, I said. Not to me. Not to anyone who loves you. Do you understand? She nodded, but her eyes stayed uncertain. I waited for the porch light, she added softly. When it didn't turn on, I thought maybe I missed you. Missed me. The idea that she believed this was somehow her failure lodged in my throat like a stone. I should have been there, I said. That's on me. She looked up sharply. But you were working. The way she said it, so practiced, so automatic, told me how many times she'd repeated that sentence to herself. Yes, I admitted. I was. And sometimes working makes me forget what matters. But that's not your job to fix. She studied me again, like she was recalibrating. My brother watched from the doorway, silent, giving us space. Daddy, she said after a moment, did I do good? There it was again. I closed my eyes, just for a second, and then looked at her fully. You did everything right, I said. You were brave. But you shouldn't have had to be. Her lower lip trembled. I was scared, she confessed. I know, I said, pulling her into my chest. You don't have to be brave with me. She cried then. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just quiet sobs that shook her small body while she held on to me like I might disappear if she loosened her grip. I let her cry. I didn't rush it. I didn't tell her to stop. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were red but lighter, like something heavy had been set down. My brother cleared his throat behind us. I documented everything, he said. Photos. Statements. Linda's call log. In case you need it. The word documented sent a chill through me. Need it for what? I asked, though I already knew. In case this happens again, he replied. Or in case someone tries to pretend it didn't. I nodded slowly. I looked back at my daughter, now tracing patterns on the table with her finger. Do you want to come home with me? I asked. She glanced toward my brother, then back at me. Will you be there? She asked. Yes, I said without hesitation. I promise. Promises are dangerous things. But this one, I intended to keep. On the drive home, she sat in the back seat, humming softly, a sound I hadn't realized I'd missed. At a red light, I caught her watching me in the rearview mirror. What? I asked. She smiled shyly. I like when you drive. Why? Because you're not on the phone. The comment landed gently and cut deep. When we got home, I turned on every light. The porch. The hallway. Her room. No more waiting in the dark, I said. She nodded solemnly. That afternoon, while she colored at the kitchen table, I stepped outside and stood on the driveway where she'd waited. I imagined her sitting there, knees drawn up, listening for a sound that never came. I pressed my palm to the concrete. Cold. Unforgiving. I understood then that the blood wasn't just from a scraped knee. It was from panic. From fear. From a child realizing the world doesn't always respond when you do everything right. That realization had changed her. And it had changed me. Inside, my phone buzzed. A message from my boss. Heard you left early. Everything okay? I stared at the screen. For the first time, I didn't rush to craft the perfect answer. I looked at my daughter, bent over her coloring book, tongue caught between her teeth in concentration. No more outsourcing this, I whispered to myself. It's not. And I need time. I set the phone down. Later that evening, as I tucked her into bed, she reached for my hand. Daddy. Yes. You stayed today. I will tomorrow too, I said. She smiled, eyes already closing. As I turned off the light, I knew this wasn't the end of the damage. But it was the end of pretending it hadn't happened. And whatever came next, with my job, my marriage, my family, it would be shaped by this moment. By the blood on her small hands. And by my decision to finally see it. We didn't fight that night. That surprised me. I'd braced myself for shouting, for accusations hurled across the kitchen like broken plates. I expected tears, slammed doors, a scorecard pulled from the past. Instead, there was a quiet that felt deliberate. Chosen. The kind of quiet people use when they're too tired to perform their anger anymore. My daughter fell asleep quickly, exhausted in a way children shouldn't be. I stood in her doorway longer than necessary, listening to her breathe, committing the sound to memory like it might be taken from me if I didn't. When I finally turned around, my wife was leaning against the hallway wall. She's out, I said. I know, she replied. I checked already. We stood there for a moment, side by side, looking at the same closed door but not quite sharing the same view of it. I made tea, she said. If you want. In the kitchen, we sat across from each other at the table where we'd once planned vacations we never took. The mug steamed between us, untouched. The clock on the wall ticked louder than it ever had before. I didn't know she was alone, my wife said finally. I need you to believe that. I do, I replied. And I meant it. She exhaled, some tension leaving her shoulders. But, she continued, eyes fixed on the rim of her mug, I knew she was with your mother. And I trusted that. I nodded slowly. So did I. The words hung there, heavier than they should have been. That trust, she said, didn't come from nowhere. It came from years of needing someone else to step in. I looked up. Because I wasn't? I asked. She met my eyes then. Not angry. Not defensive. Just tired. You were here, she said carefully. And you weren't. At the same time. That landed. I learned how to do things without you, she continued. School forms. Doctor's appointments. Bad nights. Good nights. I stopped calling because it felt like interrupting. Interrupting. I thought of all the times my phone buzzed during meetings, the way I'd flip it face down without looking. I told myself it was temporary, I said. That once things stabilized, I'd slow down. She gave a small, sad smile. They never stabilize, she said. They just replace each other. Silence again. Not empty. I didn't leave her on purpose, she said after a moment. I assumed your mother would stay. That she always did. And when she didn't? I asked. My wife swallowed. I didn't know until it was already late, she admitted. And by then, I convinced myself it couldn't be as bad as it sounded. That was the first crack. Why? I asked. Because admitting how bad it was would mean admitting how fragile everything else is, she said. Including us. There was. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of it settling into my bones. We've been surviving, I said. Not living. She nodded. Surviving takes less honesty. I thought about the roles we'd slipped into without noticing. Me, the provider who measured love in hours worked. Her, the stabilizer who absorbed the impact and kept going. I thought if I handled my part, I said, you'd handle yours. And together, it would add up to a family. And I thought, she replied softly, that if I didn't complain, you'd come back sooner. Neither of us spoke for a while after that. Outside, a car passed, headlights sweeping briefly across the walls. For a second, it looked like movement. Progress. Do you still want this? She asked suddenly. The question was quiet, but it landed like a dropped weight. Yes, I said without hesitation. Then I paused. But I don't want it the way it's been. She studied my face, searching for something. What does that mean? She asked. It means I don't get to disappear and call it responsibility, I said. It means you don't have to carry everything alone and call it strength. Her eyes filled, but she didn't look away. And if that costs us something? She asked. I thought of the message from my boss still unanswered. Of the expectations I'd built my identity around. Then it costs us something, I said. Because this already has. She reached for her mug, finally taking a sip. Her hands were steady, but her voice wasn't. I don't know how to trust that this won't just be a moment, she said. That in 6 months, you won't be gone again. I nodded. You shouldn't trust words, I said. Not right now. So what do we trust? Patterns, I replied. New ones. That earned a small, skeptical laugh. You always did like systems, she said. Only when they're broken, I answered. She stood and carried her mug to the sink. I watched her, noticing details I'd stopped seeing, the way she moved, efficient and quiet, the posture of someone used to being the last line of defense. I need help, she said, her back to me. Not just with logistics. With being seen. I stood too. I'm here, I said. She turned. Be careful, she replied. That sentence used to mean something different to us. I nodded, accepting the rebuke. That night, we didn't resolve anything. We didn't make promises. We didn't touch. But when we went to bed, she didn't turn away. In the dark, I listened to our breathing slowly find the same rhythm, like 2 clocks finally syncing after years of being off by seconds. I thought about how easy it is to miss a marriage while you're busy maintaining it. How neglect doesn't always look like cruelty. Sometimes it looks like efficiency. Before sleep took me, my phone buzzed again. Another message from my boss. We need to talk tomorrow. This project needs leadership. I stared at the screen, then at the ceiling. Leadership. I used to know exactly what that meant. Now, lying next to the woman I'd slowly sidelined, I understood something new. Some things fall apart loudly. Others fade quietly, right in front of you, while you're busy calling it stability. Tomorrow, I'd have to decide which version of leadership I was willing to lose. And which marriage I was finally ready to fight for. The morning started with a knock I wasn't expecting. It was still early, too early for anything good. My daughter was eating cereal at the kitchen table, counting the blueberries like they mattered. My wife stood at the sink, rinsing a mug she hadn't finished. The house felt fragile, like one wrong sound could splinter it. The knock came again. From patient. I opened the door and found my brother on the porch, jacket zipped, jaw set in that familiar way that meant he'd already made a decision and was just waiting for the world to catch up. "Can we talk?" he asked. I nodded and stepped aside. He didn't waste time. "We never did. I went to see Mom," he said. The word landed hard. "When?" I asked. "Last night," he replied. "After you left." I closed the door slowly, like that might soften what was coming. "I didn't go to fight," he continued. "I went to document." My stomach tightened. "What does that mean?" "It means I took notes. Dates. Exactly what she said. Exactly what she didn't." I leaned against the counter, suddenly grateful for something solid to hold me up. "She admitted she left her there," he went on. "Didn't see a problem with it. Said kids need to learn patience. Independence." My daughter laughed at something on her tablet, the sound slicing clean through the room. "And then," my brother added quietly, "she said if anything happened, it wouldn't have been her fault." I felt something cold settle behind my eyes. "What did you do?" I asked. He looked at me for a long second. "I told her this wasn't a family disagreement," he said. "It was neglect. And I told her I was reporting it." The room went still. "You reported Mom?" I asked. "Yes." The word didn't wobble. I thought about everything that came with that. Fractured holidays, whispered accusations, the way family fractures don't heal cleanly. "Why?" I asked, even though I already knew. "Because someone had to draw a line," he said. "And because your daughter deserves adults who take responsibility seriously." I rubbed my face with both hands. "She's going to say we turned on her," I said. "She already thinks that," he replied. "This just makes it official." My wife turned from the sink, eyes wide. "You did the right thing," she said. My brother nodded once. "I also spoke to a family advocate," he added. "Nothing formal yet. Just options." "Options for what?" I asked. "For ensuring this doesn't happen again," he said. "Temporary guardianship if needed. Boundaries with teeth." Guardianship. The word echoed in my head, heavy and unfamiliar. "I'm not trying to take your place," he said quickly. "I'm trying to back you up." I looked at my daughter, now carefully arranging blueberries into a smiley face. "I don't want peace," I said slowly. "I want safety." My brother's expression softened. "Then we're aligned," he said. The phone rang. My mother's name lit up the screen. I stared at it, my thumb hovering. "Don't answer," my brother said. "Not yet." I let it ring. She left a voicemail. Then another call. Then a text. "How dare you do this to me?" I felt the old reflex kick in, the urge to explain, to soothe, to restore balance at my own expense. I didn't move. "I'll handle communication," my brother said. "For now. You focus on your daughter." That afternoon, I took my daughter to the park. We sat on a bench while she climbed and slid and laughed like the world hadn't almost taught her something cruel. "Daddy," she said suddenly breathless, "can Grandma come play too?" I swallowed. "Not right now," I said gently. "Did she do something bad?" I considered my answer carefully. "She made a mistake," I said. "And grown-ups have to fix their mistakes too." She nodded, satisfied. Later, after she fell asleep that night, my phone buzzed again. "My boss. We need clarity on your availability going forward." Clarity. The word felt heavier now than it ever had before. I typed, deleted, typed again. "I won't be traveling for a while. We'll need to adjust." The reply took longer than usual. "That's going to affect your trajectory." I stared at the message, then at the hallway leading to my daughter's room. "I know," I whispered. I set the phone down and sat at the table, the same one where my brother had drawn lines I'd been too afraid to. For years, I'd confused keeping the peace with doing the right thing. My brother hadn't. He'd chosen conflict because it protected someone who couldn't protect herself. That night, as I turned off the lights and checked the locks, I felt something unfamiliar settle into my chest. Not relief. Resolve. The kind that doesn't ask permission. The kind that understands consequences, and chooses them anyway. Tomorrow I would have to make my own line permanent. But tonight I finally understood what my brother did. He didn't betray the family. He protected it. The day I finally spoke up, I didn't raise my voice. That surprised me the most. For years, I'd imagined confrontation as something loud, doors slammed, words weaponized, emotions spilling everywhere. But when the moment actually came, it was quiet, controlled, heavy in a way noise never is. I woke before the alarm, heart already working overtime. My wife slept beside me, one arm stretched into the empty space where our daughter sometimes crawled in during the night. I lay there staring at the ceiling, counting breaths, feeling the weight of everything waiting for me. Today, there would be no hiding behind good intentions. I got dressed slowly, deliberately, like each movement was a promise I couldn't take back. In the kitchen, my daughter sat coloring at the table, tongue caught between her teeth in concentration. She looked up when she heard my footsteps. "Daddy, are you going to work?" she asked. I knelt beside her chair. "Not today," I said. "Today I'm fixing something." She smiled like that was the simplest thing in the world. The drive to my mother's house felt longer than it ever had, even though I'd made it 100 times before. Every familiar turn carried a memory, holidays, arguments disguised as jokes, apologies that never quite landed. I parked at the curb and sat there with the engine off, hands gripping the wheel. I wasn't afraid of her anger. I was afraid of my own reflex to back down. I rang the doorbell. She opened the door already scowling, like she'd been waiting for the chance to be offended. "So," she said, folding her arms, "you finally decided to show up." "I'm not here to argue," I said. "I'm here to be clear." She laughed sharply. "After what you and your brother did, you think you get to be clear?" I stepped inside anyway. The house smelled the same, clean, familiar, deceptively safe. "You left my daughter alone," I said. "For 5 hours. At night." "She was fine," my mother snapped. "Nothing happened." "Something did happen," I replied. "She learned she couldn't rely on you." Her eyes narrowed. "You're exaggerating." "No," I said calmly. "I'm done minimizing." The words felt strange coming out of my mouth, steady, unflinching. "You embarrassed me," she said. "You let your brother humiliate me. Do you have any idea how that looks?" I nodded. "Yes," I said. "And I chose my daughter anyway." Silence stretched between us. "You're overreacting," she said finally. "Families handle things internally." "This isn't internal," I said. "It's about safety." Her voice dropped. "So what, you're cutting me off?" "I'm setting boundaries," I replied. "You won't be alone with her. Not until trust is rebuilt. And that's not on my timeline, it's on yours." Her face hardened. "You think you're better than me now?" she asked. I took a breath. "I think I'm responsible for someone who can't protect herself," I said. "And I failed once. I won't fail again." She shook her head. "Your brother put these ideas in your head." "No," I said. "He just did what I was too afraid to do." I turned toward the door. "This conversation isn't a negotiation," I added. "It's a statement." She didn't follow me. On the drive home, my phone buzzed. "My boss again. We need to talk. Today." I pulled over before answering. The call was brief. Clinical. They needed someone who could travel. Someone flexible. Someone unencumbered. I listened without interrupting. "So," he said at last, "can you commit?" I pictured my daughter sitting alone in the dark. "No," I said. The silence on the other end felt final. "I understand," he replied. "Then we'll need to make changes." "I understand too," I said. I hung up before regret could find me. When I got home, my wife was sitting on the couch, knees tucked under her, phone in her hands. "You talked to her," she said. I nodded. "And work?" she asked. I sat beside her. "I chose us," I said. "It's going to cost." She leaned her head against my shoulder. "We'll figure it out," she said. That night, after our daughter fell asleep, I stood in her doorway longer than usual. Watched her chest rise and fall. Memorized the sound of safety. For the first time, I didn't feel torn between who I was and who I needed to be. They were finally the same person. Choosing the hard right didn't make me feel powerful. It made me feel honest. And I knew, whatever came next, whatever we lost or rebuilt, this was the decision everything else would grow from. Tomorrow wouldn't be easier, but it would be clean. And that was something I could finally live with. The weeks after everything went quiet felt louder than the chaos that came before. No late-night calls. No confrontations. No emergencies demanding immediate action. Just space. And I didn't know what to do with it at first. I woke each morning half expecting another shoe to drop, another accusation, another consequence, another moment where I'd have to defend the choices I'd made. But the days kept moving forward, indifferent to my anxiety. Life didn't explode. It adjusted. My daughter started sleeping through the night again. No more wandering into our room with silent tears and restless hands. She laughed more easily, like her body had finally been convinced the world was predictable again. One afternoon, she asked if we could plant something in the backyard. "So it grows," she said, crouching in the dirt with absolute confidence. We planted a small tree together. Nothing dramatic. Just a sapling that bent slightly in the breeze. "How long until it's big?" she asked. "A long time," I said. She nodded. "That's okay." I realized then how much she understood. Work found its new rhythm too. The title changed. The pay dipped. The meetings stopped asking me to be everywhere at once. At first, I felt the loss sharply, like I'd stepped off a moving train and was watching the life I thought I wanted disappear down the tracks. But something unexpected happened. I started coming home before dark. I cooked dinner more nights than not. I learned my daughter's favorite songs. I listened instead of checking my phone. The ambition didn't die. It just stopped being louder than everything else. My wife noticed before I did. "You're here," she said one night as we folded laundry together. "I always was," I replied. She shook her head gently. "Not like this." The distance between us, the quiet resentment, the unspoken negotiations, began to close. Not magically. Slowly. With effort. With forgiveness that had to be earned daily. Some nights we talked about what happened. Other nights we didn't. Both felt like progress. My mother didn't reach out. Neither did I. The silence hurt in a dull, familiar way, like an old bruise you forget until you lean on it wrong. But it also taught me something important. Not all distance is abandonment. Some of it is protection. My brother checked in often. Never to say, "I told you so." Just to make sure we were okay. "You did good," he said once. I shook my head. "I did what I should have done sooner." He smiled. "That still counts." One evening, months later, my daughter climbed onto my lap as I sat on the porch watching the sky fade. "Daddy," she said, "you always come when I call now." The words landed softly. They stayed. I held her tighter than I meant to. That night, after she fell asleep, I stood in the backyard and looked at the little tree we'd planted. Still thin. Still fragile. But alive. I thought about the life I almost lost chasing something that kept asking for more. And the life that stayed when I finally stopped running. I didn't win. I didn't get applause or validation or a neat ending where everyone understood my choices. What I got was quieter. Stronger. A home that felt safe. A daughter who trusted me. A sense of self that didn't depend on approval. The call that split my life in two didn't destroy me. It clarified me. And every day since, I've been choosing the life that stayed.